Opinions and ideas expressed in the following Moraine Valley Broadcast Channel recording are those of its creators and do not represent the views of Moraine Valley Community College.
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Jake and the Foreigners. Today my co-host Kasem and Luke and I are going to talk about a topic that everyone has probably heard of, but everyone might not be familiar with. We're talking about Hamilton the musical. We've all heard of it, but I don't think we all know the history behind it, so that's what we're going to talk about. I want to give you guys a little bit of an introduction, so Kasem and Luke, tell me about your background and why you decided to be a part of this podcast. Luke, you can go first.
My name is Luke, and I became interested. I'm interested in history, so since Hamilton is a part of it, it was a no-brainer to do so. And it's just interesting to see the story behind how America was shaped to the country it is now.
And, Jake, thanks for having me on the show, first of all.
No problem.
I have to agree with Luke. I'm a very big history buff as well. And when I found out that this would be about Jefferson as well as Hamilton, I couldn't turn down the offer to be a part of this podcast.
Understandable. This is episode 1, and yeah, we're talking about Hamilton the musical, but we have something a little more specific than just the entire musical to talk about. So more specifically, the question we're going to end up figuring out is, how do the different views between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton shape early American history after the American Revolution, and then how does Hamilton the musical represent those ideas today? And to answer this, I'll be asking you guys a couple of questions related to that topic, and we'll see if we can dig a little deeper and find some more information. So now that we give the audience a little bit of background, do you want to go to the first question? What were some of the major differences between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton's ideologies for the future of the United States? So kind of what Casey was going off of.
Well, Thomas Jefferson was against the idea of fortifying the federal government because in his point of view, the intention to establish a centralized government would only lead to the same, if not worse, decision the English authority did in Europe, where the country got destroyed because of greed. Moreover, Thomas Jefferson's the prospect of power basically evolved around the idea that the common people, farmers to be exact, should have been in full command of their own future instead of the government officials dictating what they can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, Alexander Hamilton had an opposing outlook in regards to how the American economy should progress. Since Alexander Hamilton's perspective, he believed that trade played a major difference and a huge advantage at the very same time, and therefore he championed the concept of trade, and he believed that needed to be prioritized. So essentially, Alexander Hamilton perceived the idea of trade as beneficial to the merchant economy, whether foreign or domestic, and Hamilton additionally believed that the concept of trade would bring people from all over the world together, and as a result, more wisdom was passed from one individual to another.
So can either of you guys give some examples about, specific examples on your stated opinions?
Alexander Hamilton surveyed the cities as the central stage for the development and improvement of the community's well-being. Also the establishment of prosperity, trade, skills, education, and so on. While Thomas Jefferson had an opposing view, he was against it. Because since Thomas Jefferson identified Hamilton's plan to reinforce the federal government and the office of the president as a way of making sure that the elites, otherwise known as the financial few who run the country, interest groups, would control the Congress for their own beneficial gains.
Mm-hmm. And in other words, what Luke's basically saying is that Thomas Jefferson compared Hamiltonianism to the very same concept of the way of life Jefferson experienced in Europe. For Jefferson's point of view, Hamilton's ideals would only have ushered a general hardship and poverty in the cities.
Okay, so yeah, clearly the viewpoints between Jefferson and Hamilton were very different. But moving on, since we're short on time, can you provide an example of the musical's interpretation of the issues of corruption and greed between the two parties?
Yes, I can. Hamilton, the musical, especially the song Cabinet Battle No. 1, exhibits the different views both political figures had on the state and the futuristic outlook of the nation. To put it in a perspective, the lines from the musical, "But Hamilton forgets his plan would have the government assume state debts," Now place your bets as to who that benefits, the very seat of the government where Hamilton sits. The lyrics, of course, describe Hamilton's governmental position as the Secretary of State and Treasury. Additionally, the text, not true. If we assume the debts, the union gets a new line of credit, a new financial theoretic. How do you not get it? If we're aggressive and competitive, the union gets a boost. You would rather give it a sedative. That's the view presented on the Hamilton side of the story.
12. So how did Alexander Hamilton react to Jefferson's accusations of having ties to the European-style autocracy and personal influence and wealth?
Well, to contradict Thomas Jefferson's criticism, Alexander Hamilton created a political party of his own, known as the Federalists. Furthermore, Alexander Hamilton challenged Jefferson's claims of the plans to create an autocratic government by claiming that only a madman would attempt such a thing.
In addition, Alexander Hamilton presented his side of the argument to George Washington by describing Thomas Jefferson as the person with the grand scheme to eliminate the nation's economy under the claim that Thomas Jefferson was compelled by greed. And also, Thomas Jefferson created a party of his own known as the Republicans. So the reason why Hamilton created a party of his own was because Thomas Jefferson did the same thing before that.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, Alexander Hamilton labeled Thomas Jefferson as a person of unsound and dangerous ideologies that would threaten the law of the land and the Constitution itself.
Okay, so does the musical Hamilton address the particular topic of war relations between the U.S. and the French? And if so, can you provide me with an example?
Well, yeah, the musical Hamilton definitely represents a distinguished portrayal of the historical events throughout and after the Revolutionary War and the different outlooks Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton both presented. For instance, in the song titled Cabinet Battle No. 2, the singer/actor portraying Thomas Jefferson accuses Alexander Hamilton of having ties to the principles of the crown. For the lyrics, he knows nothing of royalty, smells like new money, dresses like fake royalty, desperate to rise above his station. Everything he does betrays the ideals of our nation. And that definitely displays Jefferson's view of Hamilton.
Okay, so Luke, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Additionally, the performer playing the role of Alexander Hamilton counters the accusation of betrayal by singing the following lyrics. You must be out of your goddamn mind if you think the president is gonna bring the nation to the brink of meddling in the middle of a military mess. A game of chess where France is queen and kingless. We sign a treaty with the king whose head is now in a basket. Would you like to take it out and ask it? Then he goes on to say, should we honor our treaty king Louis's head? Do whatever you want, I'm super dead.
Oh, wow.
Additionally, the performer playing Thomas Jefferson responds with the following statement. Have you an ounce of regret? You accumulate debt, you accumulate power, yet in the hour of need you forget.
So, all in all, who do you think had the greater influence on the decisions George Washington made during his presidency? Luke, you can go first.
Well, Thomas Jefferson failed to persuade George Washington from abandoning Hamilton's fiscal policies in terms of economics because George Washington, had seen Hamilton's ideologies as the best possible way for the country to be prosperous and happy.
And in addition, the song Right Hand Man in Hamilton further depicts the shared values Alexander Hamilton and George Washington had in terms of the aspiration to strive and make a change for the better, even if the only way to do so depended on violent acts of war. Moreover, throughout the song there is a specific theme. For example, the lyrics, we are outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned. We gotta make 'em all outstand. I'm gonna need a right-hand man. It's alright, you wanna fight? You've got a hunger. I was like you when I was younger, head full of fantasies of dying like a martyr. And that was George Washington's character saying that. And then Hamilton responds by saying, yes, I am not thrown away shot. Dying is easy, young man. Living is harder. Washington represents that point.
So, which song was that again?
That was Right Hand Man in the play Hamilton.
Okay, so throughout like all this, it seems like they didn't really agree on much at all. So was there anything that Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson actually did agree on?
And they both agreed on the fact that George Washington should not concede the president of the should not concede to be the president after he finishes first term. Instead, they both agreed that he should go for the second one.
Yeah, and to add to what Luke said, they both obviously wanted what's best for our country. They just had different ways of how to go about it, but at the end of the day, they both wanted our country to succeed and the people to grow prosperous.
Okay, so after all of that, how did the rivalry between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton end up affecting like today's politics, today's economics, trade, or any other aspect of the American system that we have like currently? Kasem?
Well, I'd like to defer to Luke on that one, as he knows a lot about the impact of their arguments on today's world.
Okay, so...
Well, the very origins of the two political party system can be traced back into the 1800s, and even before that, when the main political field evolved around the Republican Party, led by Thomas Jefferson, and the Federalist Party, led by Alexander Hamilton. Therefore, the same can be said about the politics today, where the primary parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, dominate today's politics.
Do you guys think that the musical Hamilton represented the ideas that Jefferson and Hamilton had in general back then, and like the way it affected now? Do you think that the musical represents everything in a good, like, correctly?
Oh, I think it represents it mostly correctly, but there might be some exaggerations or hyperboles in there, because at the end of the day, the musical Hamilton, while it is a historical depiction, but it also is a form of entertainment
to make money.
So
yeah,
it's going to be a little bit different.
I agree with this statement.
Okay, so we're about out of time now, and this concludes episode 1 of Jake and the Foreigners podcast. It might be the last one we ever do, but I just want to thank my co-hosts Kasem and Luke for joining me today, and I hope that you, the audience, got a little bit more knowledge about Hamilton and the history behind it.
Well, thanks so much for having us, Jake.
No problem.
It's a real honor to be on the program.
No problem.
Same here.
You're welcome back anytime. Good night.